Welcome to episode 58 of the Unholy Trinity Podcast. And for those of you watching on YouTube for the very first time, welcome to the first part of what we've termed the South American Revolution in terms of this podcast and this particular episode. It's certainly something which is a little bit different for ourselves as we've gone down the video route for the very first time. And I'm delighted to say for this episode and for our first video of all time, we've been joined by South American football journalist and in particular Colombian football expert, Simon Edwards. Simon, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Thanks for the invitation.
No problem at all. And just so everyone knows, you are actually at the moment in Colombia. You are based over there. How are things going over there at this moment in time?
Yeah, I'm based here in Medellin, so the lockdown has been tough, but we're looking forward to some relaxation of things and football returning in the coming weeks. So it's been a long 6 months, but it looks like things are starting to get better over here.
Most definitely, and we said off air, and we're probably a little bit ahead over in the UK in terms of things being reopened and things like that, and how much we appreciate obviously things maybe a little bit more now that we've got the current situation going on. But without further ado, as I said at the start, South American football expert, Everton seem to be linked very, very heavily to a couple of South Americans, and we're going to touch on a third as well in the second part, but the main two being Allan and James Rodriguez. So we're going to use the first part, if we may, to discuss Allan. I've just been having a quick check of the usual Twitter. People have started tracking planes and helicopters as we speak. Very strong rumours. It was on all the outlets that a fee has been agreed. The final thing which has just been agreed has been the agent fees. The president of Napoli has just confirmed he's going to be coming to Everton. So all the stars are aligning, and it seems that Allan will be an Everton player in the coming days. What are your thoughts on Allan, Simon? Because Everton really struggled in centre midfield last season. We brought in Jean-Philippe Gbamin, who unfortunately got injured after a couple of games and hasn't been seen on the pitch for the Blues since. Morgan Schneiderlin's now gone. We've sort of got Fabian Delph, who hasn't really been seen particularly very much. Gomez, Tom Davis have been really the two. Sigurdsson's dropping in. What will Allan bring to Everton that we so desperately need?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very significant upgrade on what you've had. Obviously, those players at different points have had good times in their career, but I think Allan has been very consistent. He's a player who, as you say, covers a lot of ground, works hard, wins possession, but is also very, very good in the ball. I mean, his pass numbers, we're talking 85, 90% pass completion. He's a very consistent passer. He makes a good number of tackles. Can also make quite a few, 16, 17, we're talking at least one key pass per game leading to a goal. So he's a player who is very effective at winning possession. He's a complete midfielder. You can sit him a little bit deeper to protect the defence and move the ball forward. Or he can also break into the edge of the attacking third. He's not a great goal-scoring threat. He's not going to be putting up 10 goals a season, but he'll pop up with the occasional goal here and there. And he'll definitely provide a lot of support in terms of ball winning and then ball progression as well. So I think he's a very, very complete midfielder. I think he's well suited to the Premier League. He's strong. He's been involved with the Brazil squad 9-10 times over the last couple of years as well. So he's a very complete player. He's not a typical Brazilian defensive midfielder in that I think his passing ability is better than many of the deep line Brazilian players. Most of them are destroyers. With Allan, you're talking about a player who wins the ball very well, but is also very complete and very tidy on the ball. So I can't see any real drawbacks to this signing. A very smart, industrious, tidy, technical player who should knit things together, I think, in your midfield.
Yeah, one thing that we've missed massively was when we sold Idrissa Gueye to PSG. He was always that ball winner. Maybe not probably the best technically on the ball, but he was the one who would break up play, bring other players in, and probably more importantly from us, he could recover. His recovery was very, very good. Is that something that we can expect? You mentioned there, obviously, Allan winning the ball back is very, very good. Can we expect him to be able to recover, get back, break up play, and then, more, really important for ourselves as well is bring in someone like Jose Gomez, who's a very, very technically good player, but he's struggled as well because he doesn't seem to have had that kind of partner alongside him in the midfield.
Yeah, I don't think he's as such an obvious athlete as Idrissa Gueye. Idrissa Gueye obviously stands out particularly for his athleticism and his ability, as you say, to recover. Allan obviously has a good engine, covers a lot of ground during play, wins the ball well. I think I would say the difference is perhaps Allan has slightly better anticipation, whereas Idrissa Gueye's perhaps got the slight edge in terms of athleticism. But I would say the way Allan is better, the area in which Allan is better is his use of the ball. He's more likely to play those progressive passes than I'd say Idrissa Gueye. But both fulfill the role of enabling those around them, which I think is what Everton perhaps need. You know, the players you've mentioned in there before, previous seasons, they're all okay. But in terms of someone who will win the ball, will bring others into play, will play it simple, but then also, I think with Allan, you have the potential for the occasional incisive through ball from deep, or clipping something over the back for some of the pacey wide men Everton have had over the last season or so. So I think you're going to get the same defensive contribution. I think the characteristics are slightly different. Whereas Idrissa Gueye would have been covering, running around 3 or 4 players trying to win the ball back. I think Allan's more likely to see the danger earlier and cut that out. I think his interceptions in particular are very good. He loves the tackle as well. So I think it's going to provide a lot of balance. He's someone I think Everton desperately needed. Everton were linked when they were selling Idrissa Gueye with Wilmer Barrios, a Colombian player who I'm a huge fan of. I think that's a big miss not to get him. But Allan is someone who can fulfill that role and is filling a gap I think have been quite clear for Everton over the last season.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk as well. I mean, it's great to hear you speak about him, because obviously the things that you're highlighting, as we've said, are things that we have been missing. And I've seen footage of him celebrating making a tackle as well, things like that. And that's the kind of thing which Everton fans absolutely thrive off and love. They love a player like that who shows full commitment, celebrating tackles like they scored a goal. That once we're all back at Goodison Park, the place would erupt if he started doing things like that, to be honest. But there's been a little bit of, I've seen quite a few people mention about his age. He's 29 years of age. Do we think he's at the peak of his powers now? Do we think he's on the decline? Or, what's the script there? Because so many people now seem to be hung up on this. He hasn't got any kind of sell-on value and things like that. Do we think that he's going to offer enough to the side at the age of 29 years?
Yeah, I think we saw his best football 2016, 2017 into 2018. So it's not like he peaked 10 years ago and now you're getting him. He's still a player who's at a very good level. And he's a player I think has matured across his career. If he was playing this well as a 21-year-old, with all due respect, he wouldn't be going to Everton. And you wouldn't be getting him for, 25 million, which in today's market, coronavirus obviously has had an impact, but is not a huge outlay for one of the better midfielders in the Italian league. So I think there are a lot of factors, but a Premier League team is always going to have to play a premium. And given how consistent he has been over the last few years, and given the fact as well that he wasn't the same player as he is today when he was 21, 22, he's a player who's matured. In terms of resale value, of course, it's going to be difficult to recoup that, but to be honest, if he does it in the Premier League for 2 seasons, 25 million, you could get that back in 2 seasons' time. It's not a huge outlay, really, all things considered. So I think, it's not a project Everton have. They're buying the finished article at this stage, but I think he's going to be the best player in Everton. If they get James, who we'll talk about, maybe then there's competition. But you're buying your best player for 25 million, who's still in his 20s. I think that's good business, really.
Yeah, you mentioned there about us not being a project. It's really funny because what the club have been trying to sell for maybe the last couple of years, really, maybe a bit more since Farhad Mashiri came in, is that we're a project. We want to go from where we are to up there. And unfortunately, we brought in a high-profile manager in terms of naming. Ronald Koeman came in, didn't do particularly well. We had then the unfortunate time with Sam Allardyce, which didn't go down particularly well with Everton fans. Marco Silva comes in. We thought we had high hopes for him in terms of obviously his age and upcoming coach. Didn't work. Obviously, then Big Dunk took over the reins for a short period of time before, obviously, Carlo Ancelotti then comes in. And it's always been pushing this agenda of we are a project. And Marcel Brands has always said he looks for players, in and around a certain age category, maybe 20, 22 to 25, 26. So players who can kick on and improve, have that sell-on value. Whereas what we're seeing in this window, you mentioned there, Allan's 29 years of age. You've got players who've been linked with in regards to Rodriguez, another one who's late 20s again. Decore's 27 from Watford, another player we've been linked with. So this talk of project seems to have gone away a little bit. And Carlo Ancelotti, this is how it appears. Carlo Ancelotti seems to be getting his way and saying, listen, we've got probably a decent nucleus of young players at Everton in regards to your Richarlison, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Mason Holgate. You've got Luca Dean, who's a little bit older, but very, very good left back. So in terms of our youth, we've probably got a nucleus of good young players. We need to now buy quality because we need to try and make the club kick on quicker than it would do if we didn't.
Yeah, I think if you look, you look at some of the players Everton have brought in over the last couple of seasons, Walcott, Schneiderlin. These aren't players who are young with high potential. These are players who have been edged out by Everton's rivals. These are players who are no longer wanted by the teams Everton aspire to overtake or to compete with. So I think there's a difference, I think, with this series of transfers, because these are players, there's no risk involved in signing Allan. I can't really see any risk. You're signing one of the better players in Serie A for the last 3 or 4 years. Obviously, he doesn't come with Premier League experience, but when you're buying some of these Premier League 28, 29-year-olds who have gone out of favour, I mean, obviously there's less of a risk, but you know what you're getting, you know where the ceiling is. Whereas if you're signing someone who's done very well in Serie A, and we'll talk about a few other players as well, you're talking about a different quality of player for a similar price as well. I think you've paid perhaps too much for some of these players who you know what you're going to get at best. And I think at times they've fallen below that standard. So I think this seems like a much more positive step. You're buying better players for a similar price, and at times 1 or 2 years younger. So I do see a real progression in terms of the acquisitions this summer as opposed to previous years. Because, Morgan Schneiderlin, fine, he's solid, but you know what you're getting. And that's been the same for 6 or 7, I think, of Everton signings over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I think the fans would echo that. And there's been a lot of talk about the financial restraints that we could have in this window. And I'm not quite sure what's going on in regards to why all of a sudden we can spend this money, whether there's a few sales in the pipeline, which has got to happen. We've got some big wage earners. You've spoken there, obviously Schneiderlin's gone. Walcott earns decent money. You got Cenk Tosun, who's been injured, doesn't really play. Yannick Bolasie, who's still on the wage bill. Sandro Ramirez, another one who's earning £100,000 a week, who's played about 13 games for the club. Things like that. And we just haven't got it right in the last maybe 4, 5, 6 transfer windows, and that's why we are where we are. But before we do sort of wrap up this part, and we go on to discuss obviously the Colombians who've been linked with the club as well. How important do you think Carlo Ancelotti has been in this deal for Allan? Because obviously, if Carlo wasn't there, he's working with Napoli, obviously close relationship. If he wasn't at the club, do you think it would have even happened?
No, I think he's huge in all of this. And we'll talk about James and maybe even more so with James. But I think in both cases, it's very, very important to have a manager. Everton is a team people know around the world. It's a team that has history, a team that people like. But it's not. There's very few South American players dreaming of playing for Everton. So it's part of the process. You can say Richarlison's their Brazilian international. That obviously has a factor as well. It draws attention to the club in Brazil. Linked with James as well, again, shows that it's a club with big aspirations. And then having a manager, one of the most successful managers in European football, is all part of the offer that Everton could put forward. So I think that's huge. And I just think in terms of a transformative signing, for me, I mean, obviously a lot of attention has been on Everton at the defence and conceding silly goals and being a bit exposed defensively. But I think with the attacking fullbacks Everton like to play, those in front, the defence midfield, is so important to provide the protection and to provide balance. And so for me, that is the area where Everton can see the biggest improvement. I think that they need more goals in attack, and the defence needs to be a bit more organised. But if you can provide that support, provide that balance, provide a little bit more control in front, giving those passing options. I think the number of times I've seen Everton going long out of the back is too many. I think Allan provides a solution there. He's very happy to receive the ball under pressure. He's very confident, and he'll help you guys progress the ball forward, as well as provide a good defensive cover in front. So for me, that is the one position. And you've mentioned bringing the guy in from Watford as well. That is, I think, how Everton can move forward and become more consistent, because they have great games and they have terrible games. And I think by shoring up and making that midfield a bit more solid, a bit more consistent, I think you'll see the biggest impact on the side.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be really interesting to see, obviously, how that develops. As I said, it's pretty much nailed on. Fee agreed, agent compensation agreed. We all seem to be good to go. So I fully expect Allan to be tied up in the next few days and announced by the club. But definitely something to watch next season. If we can tie him down and see what else we do in the transfer window and see how he positively impacts the side. But I'm for one looking forward to it. I think it's a really good progressive transfer for the club and something which we massively need, and I'm sure most Evertonians would agree with that. But Simon, appreciate your thoughts on Allan there. For all those watching on YouTube, stick around and catch up with part 2 of the South American Revolution, where we're going to go on and discuss James Rodriguez and Santiago Arias. For those of you listening on the podcast, we'll be back after this short break.